Mi único delito ha sido cubrir el cuerpo de mi esposo en su casa, pero yo no lo maté.
The woman you just heard is Rosa Graciela Mejia Izquierdo, a woman who captured the attention of everyone throughout Peru, unfortunately for a story that had all the ingredients for tragedy: betrayal, infidelity, violence, deception, and a fatal outcome that left an entire family debating between pain, sadness, and indignation. Today we have a case that happened in Peru. Join me to see all the details. Hello. Welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. Rosa Graciela Mejia Izquierdo was born in 1979, and her face went viral in all the media in Peru and even in other parts of Latin America when she revealed to the world that her marriage was not rosy, despite what could be seen on her social networks for years. She commented that she had dealt with a difficult romantic relationship with her husband, Omar Israel Caton Lyontop. Despite the uproar caused by this case, there is very little information available about Rosa and Omar. It is known that she had two younger sisters, Lisely Brigitte Mejia Izquierdo, born in 1997, and Lucy Esther Mejia Izquierdo, born in 1985. The names of her parents are unknown, as well as whether she had more siblings. According to sources from the National Police, it also emerged that she had police and judicial records, and that she was in jail for the crime of illicit drug trafficking. Omar, like Rosa, was born in 1979. He studied civil engineering at the Pedro Ruiz Gallo National University and, thanks to his profession, had a large number of job contracts nationwide throughout Peru. It was not possible to obtain much more information about him, his parents, or the rest of his family. However, it was known that he had at least one brother from his mother, named Jorge González Lyontop, and also two aunts, Carmen Lyontop and Jessica Lyontop, with whom he maintained very frequent and close contact. Rosa and Omar met in the area where they lived and became friends. Their friendship grew into love, and over time they began a romantic relationship. Rosa quickly moved into Omar's house, and they started living together. A few months later, Rosa became pregnant, and 9 months later, Chantal Alexa Caton Mejia was born. According to information published in some media, Rosa already had a daughter from a previous relationship. A few years after the birth of their daughter, Omar proposed to Rosa to formalize their relationship. She accepted, and in 2014 they got married. However, the honeymoon period did not last long, as the couple began to have many problems. On social media, Rosa and Omar's relationship appeared happy. Many photographs showed a relationship overflowing with love. They always went out together to different places, and in other posts, they looked very happy with their daughter, making it seem like the three of them were very happy. Omar traveled quite often for his work, which required him to leave home for long periods and travel to other locations to fulfill his work commitments. Despite this, the engineer found time to contribute to community projects where he lived, applying his experience and knowledge. He managed to make significant contributions that benefited all the inhabitants of the sector and some nearby towns. In this way, Omar earned the affection of many neighbors, close friends and family. Everyone spoke highly of him. Unfortunately, his home life was not going well. Rosa and Omar often fought. In fact, they went to court on several occasions. Sometimes Rosa reported him, but other times Omar accused his wife and requested intervention from the authorities. In 2019, a new element emerged in this complex situation. That year, Rosa met Giancarlo Aldayaton Torres Santisteban, who was 19 years younger than her. At first, they only spoke as friends, and she often confided in him about the difficulties in her marriage. As time went by, their conversations became more frequent. Rosa spent a lot of time alone, and the fights with Omar had driven him away. Gradually, Giancarlo seduced her, and they eventually began a clandestine love affair. Naturally, Rosa kept many things from her husband due to this new relationship. She and Giancarlo wanted to be together, and according to some information from tax sources, Rosa and Omar had initiated the necessary procedures to divorce. However, after a few months, they reconciled, or at least that was what could be concluded from various social media posts. However, after a while, the problems reappeared. The days Omar spent away from home strained their marriage. They argued out of jealousy. Sometimes Omar suspected his wife, and other times she fought with him over messages he received on his cell phone. Finally, the couple entered a pathological spiral of separating and reconciling. But for Rosa, everything was different. She felt in love with Giancarlo, and every day it became more difficult for her to live with Omar. By 2021, practically nothing remained of the marriage between Rosa and Omar, while her relationship with Giancarlo was going very well. The lovers only wanted to be together, and Omar was the only real obstacle in their way. The situation at the couple's house was truly tense, as the relationship had become very toxic. The conflicts were so severe that complaints were constantly being made. If Omar wasn't going to the police to report Rosa for abuse, she was going to the authorities to request intervention. The situation was really unsustainable. The measures taken during the COVID-19 pandemic contributed to the deterioration of their marital relationship, as confinement intensified their differences. Since mid-2021, Omar spent a lot of time in the city of Chota, located in the district and province of Cajamarca, and practically did not live with Rosa, taking advantage of the fact that he had several jobs in that area. Depending on the circumstances and the couple's mood, Omar would occasionally seek out Rosa. Thus, 2021 concluded with the arrivals and departures of a couple who no longer knew how to be together, but apparently could not separate definitively. In the first days of January 2022, when the joy of Christmas and New Year's celebrations still lingered in the air, despite the restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Omar once again reported Rosa to the authorities. Everything seemed to indicate that this was the last straw. Rosa and Giancarlo had joked about the idea of getting Omar out of the way. They fantasized about different plans to finally be together. But in the early morning of Monday, January 10th, everything became real. They had everything organized in advance, and perhaps that last complaint was the final push to launch their plan. Omar was at home sleeping quietly in the main room when someone turned on the light. He woke up startled and could barely understand what was happening. He reacted with great difficulty when his wife told him that two men in the room were robbing them. The intruders had a very violent and intimidating attitude, brandishing sharp and shiny objects with terrible consequences in mind. For this reason, Omar decided to cooperate, obey their demands, and comply. One of the men told him that they were going to tie him up and that it was best not to resist, or Rosa would pay the consequences. They ordered Omar to kneel and put his hands behind his back. They tied his feet and hands with ropes and also used his shoelaces, immobilizing him completely. Omar cooperated with the intruders at all times because he feared for his safety and that of his wife. Several times, he insisted that the thieves take whatever they wanted, but not hurt his wife. The situation was already terrible enough, but the worst part was about to happen. As soon as they finished tying him up, Rosa violently threw herself at him and began to hit him. That was when he knew she was part of the plan from the beginning, and that he was the only victim of the situation. The man could hardly process what was happening when his own wife placed a pillow over his face, preventing him from breathing. According to some sources, One of the attackers put a plastic bag over Omar's head so that he couldn't breathe. Seeing himself in this situation, the man tried to resist and struggled to free himself, but ultimately he ended up defeated. Omar vanished, and everything seemed to indicate that his life had ended. The two men, along with Rosa, dug a shallow pit just over a meter deep. They took Omar's body and placed it inside, sprinkled lime, and then covered it with earth. The two men said goodbye to Rosa with great coldness, as if they had not just committed an abominable act. They left the house, and as they walked away, they talked and laughed as if nothing had happened since that morning of January 10th. Omar's family and friends were worried because they called him repeatedly on his cell phone, but the service operator immediately went to voicemail. Those closest to Omar and who trusted Rosa asked her about him, but she told them he was working outside the city and might be out of coverage, leaving no traces of his whereabouts. Omar's aunts and his brother decided to go to the authorities to report his disappearance. The following days were marked by anguish as the relatives continued to pressure the authorities for answers. As time passed, their fear grew. For them, it was evident that something serious had happened to Omar. In addition to pressing the police, they also insisted on talking to Rosa to see if she had any information, but the woman did not seem worried. More than 2 weeks passed this way. On Tuesday, January 25, 2022, Jorge, Omar's brother, went to Rosa's house and repeatedly asked her about Omar's whereabouts. Rosa remained calm the entire time. She even told Jorge that he could come in and check to make sure everything was in order, but in the end, he decided not to enter the house. Rosa asked for his cell phone number and promised to let him know as soon as she heard anything about Omar. The next day, Wednesday, January 26th, Rosa's sisters were at their mother's house and were surprised when they saw Rosa come in, a nervous wreck and crying uncontrollably. Amid her cries, Rosa told them that 2 men had entered her house early in the morning on January 10th, tried to rob them, and pressured Omar to give them his card. When he refused, they took his life. Her sisters asked why she hadn't said anything earlier, and Rosa replied that the men had threatened her. According to the woman's story, they told her that she would have the same fate as her husband. However, she confessed to them that she could not take it anymore, and that the secret was torturing her. That is why she had decided to tell them the truth and ask for their help. The sisters asked about Omar's body, and Rosa quickly blamed the intruders. She told them that the men had buried him in the yard of the house. Immediately, both sisters decided to accompany Rosa to her house, and when they arrived, they approached the yard. A foul smell corroborated what Rosa had said. Both were horrified just imagining the condition of Omar's body. They told their sister to stay at home and wait while they notified the police. The sisters went to the Criminal Investigation Division and told the officers everything Rosa had confessed. They also mentioned that they had gone to their sister's house and detected the foul smell of a decomposing body. They detailed that their brother-in-law's body was buried in the yard of the house. After taking their statements, the officers organized a special operation to verify the women's report. They moved to the house where the couple lived, located on Chiclayo Street. Once there, the investigators knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. With the sisters' consent as witnesses, the officers proceeded to use force and entered the house. In one of the rooms they found Rosa. Then they went to the yard, where the strong smell confirmed what they were about to discover. Some officers took a shovel to dig and quickly removed some dirt. In a short time, they found Omar's remains covered in dirt and lime. They immediately notified the Attorney General, Dr. Hector Lopez Pupuche, knowing he would arrive shortly. The investigators continued to question Rosa, who stuck to her story as she had told her sisters. The woman hurried to accuse Giancarlo, her lover, of what had happened to her husband. When the prosecutor, criminology experts, and the forensic doctor continued the excavation, they determined that the body found belonged to a man. He was lying on his left side in an advanced state of decomposition. While the crime scene procedure was being carried out, the prosecutor instructed a commission from the Criminal Investigation Division to go with Rosa to capture Giancarlo. Rosa had to guide the officers to Giancarlo's home. He also lived in the same town, and Rosa took the officers to Los Cedros Street, where they found him in front of his residence. Once identified, they proceeded to arrest him. Both Rosa and Giancarlo were transferred to the headquarters of the judicial power, under the jurisdiction of the corporate third-degree criminal prosecution of Chiclayo. Meanwhile, back in the yard of the house, the investigation continued. Omar's body had already been extracted, and the inspection was ongoing. The man was dressed in blue shorts, without underwear, and wore a light blue shirt. The forensic doctor could not immediately specify the date or cause of death. It would be the forensic analysis that would determine what had happened. The remains were immediately transferred to the Legal Medicine Institute of Lambayeque. The prosecutor gave various statements to the press and reported that he was going to request preventive detention for both Rosa and Giancarlo while the investigation advanced to determine what had happened. As part of the conclusions of the investigation, the police were sure that a third person had participated in the events, and it was necessary to identify and arrest this individual. In the report presented by the expert who carried out the forensic analysis, it was confirmed that the mortal remains were indeed Omar's, and truly chilling data was provided. Omar was still alive when he was buried in the yard of his home. The forensic team found traces of earth in his throat and under his nails. According to the legal medical source, the body did not show physical injuries. They had buried him thinking they had already taken his life. After the analysis, the body was released, so his relatives could proceed with a Christian burial as soon as possible. Due to the state of decomposition, the funeral services company performed a special process and sealed the coffin with several layers of plastic. On Thursday, January 27th, relatives, friends and neighbors accompanied Omar's remains on a procession to the house where he had lived, where they held a kind of popular ceremony. Later, they continued to the local cemetery, and after some prayers, the man was finally buried. After Omar's final farewell, several relatives and friends, including his aunts and his brother, gathered near the headquarters where the Criminal Investigation Division operated, demanding swift justice. They wanted those responsible to be punished as soon as possible. On Saturday, January 29, 2022, Judge Flor Mestanza Gabriel of the Chiclayo Preparatory Investigation Court ordered 9 months of preventive detention for both Rosa and Giancarlo, both accused of taking Omar's life. They were later transferred to the Chiclayo prison to serve the period of preventive detention. In the resolution dictated by the judge, Rosa was charged with the crime of parricide, which, according to the Penal Code of Peru, establishes a harsh sentence for those who attempt against the life of their father, mother, child, or any other legitimate or illegitimate descendant, or, as in Rosa's case, the person with whom they are married. The woman faced a sentence of no less than 25 years. On the other hand, Giancarlo was accused of the crime of qualified homicide, which stipulated a sentence of more than 15 years in prison. In view of all the sanitary protocols, the hearings were carried out virtually. The accused were in a room at the headquarters of the judicial power of Lambayeque that was set up for the trial. The judge expressed that the coercive measure of preventive detention was justified because Rosa and Giancarlo did not have stable homes, family ties, or employment, and could also obstruct the investigations. A few months later, it was possible to see how the police investigations were advancing. On June 13, 2022, it was established that a third person, identified as Fernando José Mundaca González, 20 years old, had been involved and was at that time a fugitive from justice. Finally, the puzzle was complete, and the authorities presented what they believed had been the chronology of that early morning. On January 10, 2022, it was known that Rosa opened the door of her house to Giancarlo and his friend Fernando. The plan was to pretend to rob the house to subdue Omar. As we already know, Omar was surprised by his wife and her two accomplices while he was sleeping. It was Rosa who turned on the light in the room and woke Omar, convincing him that the men had broken into the house to rob them. Omar realized she was part of the plan when they tied him up and began to beat him. They finally disposed of his body without any remorse. In his speech before the court, the prosecutor requested 31 years and 8 months in prison for Rosa as the principal perpetrator, while for Giancarlo, as a primary accomplice, he asked for 24 years and 4 months. For the defendant Fernando, also as a primary accomplice, the prosecutor requested 22 years in prison. Additionally, the three had to pay a civil reparation of 100,000 Nuevo Sol Peru, equivalent to about $27,000. The accusation against Rosa was based on the fact that she failed in her duty as a wife, first betraying Omar and then planning, together with her lover, a horrible scheme to take his life in collaboration with another person. This was during a hearing of the oral trial held in 2022. Rosa and Giancarlo's defense lawyers expressed the defendant's willingness to seek an early conclusion benefit, which consists of the possibility of reducing the sentence. They also asked that the duration of the trial stages be shortened as long as they admitted their guilt. However, upon hearing the sentences proposed by the public prosecutor, they refused to accept the benefit and claimed to be innocent. According to their story, they intended to prove their innocence during the trial stage. This was not the best decision given that during the police investigations and the actions of the prosecution, substantial evidence had been gathered against both. In addition to the fact that they were mutually guilty of the crime, the second defendant, a criminal schoolboy from Chiclayo, started the oral trial against Rosa, who was nicknamed by the media as the Black Widow, as well as her young lover Giancarlo and Fernando, all accused of taking Omar's life. The prosecutor continued with his arguments, indicating that regarding the crime of parricide, the deteriorated relationship between Rosa and Omar prevailed. They had a kind of love-hate relationship in which they mutually accused each other of physical and psychological abuse. The prosecutor considered that the motive in this case was a judicial process that Rosa won, which led to a new argument that concluded with another complaint from Omar, who accused her of family violence and physical and psychological abuse. According to the prosecutor, that same day, Rosa met with her lover and, crying inconsolably, told him what had happened with Omar. The young man got angry, and Rosa took the opportunity to devise the horrible plan and convince her lover that it was her only way out. Another argument used by the prosecutor was that Rosa believed she would have the complicity of her sisters, which is why she confessed the truth to them. When she realized that it would not be the case, she maintained her version of accusing Giancarlo as the intellectual and material author, along with his friend Fernando. She claimed she never agreed to the plan, although she hid everything that happened, supposedly for fear of meeting the same fate as her husband. The prosecutor concluded that the three had acted with premeditation, cruelty, and advantage. They had been very cruel to Omar, so the court sentenced Rosa Graciela Mejia Izquierdo to 31 years and 8 months as the principal perpetrator. Her accomplices, Giancarlo, her 24-year-old lover, and Fernando, the 20-year-old friend, were sentenced to 25 years and 4 months of effective imprisonment and 22 years of imprisonment respectively. They would be eligible for parole after at least 22 years in prison. All were to serve their sentences in the penal prison of Chiclayo. In addition to serving time, they had to pay the established reparation. This tragic episode showed the devastating consequences of a lack of communication in a marriage and the inability of people to resolve their conflicts, which escalated to a fatal outcome. This dramatic story of a love triangle leaves a reflection that even in difficult situations, empathy and understanding are fundamental keys, as well as seeking professional help in time to find a peaceful resolution. If you found this video informative, remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. See you with another case. Goodbye.